Hello everybody, my name is Brad Baird, and I've chosen to present to you today on energy synthesis and how cells obtain their energy from food. The objectives that I have for this presentation is I would like you to understand how to introduce and explain the content to undergraduate students. I would also like you to understand the in-depth critical information on the energy sources of the cell. And also understand how these energy sources are created. Finally, I'd like you to understand what resources are available for further research on the subject. So why is this subject important? Well, from our textbook Essential Cell Biology, it says that cells require a constant supply of energy to generate and maintain the biological order that allows them to grow, divide, and carry out their day-to-day activities. This energy comes from the chemical bond energy in food molecules, which thereby serve as fuel for cells. The synthesis of energy is an extremely important concept when talking about cell biology. There are many important functions of the cell, but without the ability to synthesize energy, the cell would completely stop functioning. This is the main reason behind my choosing of this topic for this presentation. I knew of the importance and I wanted to express that to you. To first understand the methods that can be used in teaching concepts such as cellular respiration to undergraduate students, we must first create a proper teaching environment. Parker Palmer, writer of the book The Courage to Teach, explains that in order to have an effective teaching environment, the teacher must avoid absolutism and relativism. What do these terms mean? Well, absolutism is when the instructor claims to know all the answers. Relativism, on the other hand, is when the instructor essentially throws up their hands and says that the answer depends solely on one's own personal opinion. When teaching complex concepts such as cellular respiration, we see absolutism manifested when a teacher implies that there is only one preferred or correct reading of a text. Relativism, on the other hand, is seen when a teacher is impatient and gives up on the students and allows their interpretation to rest on their own limited understanding. As a solution to these terms and teaching environments, Parker Palmer emphasizes that we need to have a subject-centered teaching environment. A subject-centered teaching environment is ideal because it focuses solely on the subject matter. In this environment, the teacher and the student focus their attention on the subject and both explore the subject together. So now that we have understood that we need to have a subject-centered teaching environment, we next need to understand that we need to simplify the concept for the students. I have this video that I found that I really liked by a man named Simon Sinek is being interviewed on why he simplifies the subject matter that he is teaching.
How have you learned to better distill complex concepts into teachable moments?
Oh, that's an easy answer. I'm an idiot. I'm not smart. I didn't do well in school. I didn't do well in college, and so my push to simplify concepts is so that I can understand them. There's a lot of things I don't understand, and so I ask a lot of questions. Repeating back what I think I'm hearing because I don't understand. And so the desire to simplify concepts is for my own understanding. And if I can understand it, then I can share it with somebody because now I have an understanding of it. And the good news is if you make something simple, then it's repeatable. And if you make something repeatable, then it's understandable. And the best part about that is at that point, others can share your thinking without you. So many things that we're taught, whether from a teacher or somebody in industry or, sitting down with your financial advisor or whoever, you can understand it. Hopefully, maybe you think you can for the moment that you're with them, but then go to explain it, what you just learned in the meeting. Yeah. And you're like, I don't know. That's what he said. I don't know. Right. And so my desire is to be able to repeat something, which is why I need to dumb them down. It's no great secret.
So like Simon said, it's important for us to simplify our subject that we are teaching. And we can understand that Sure, maybe we need to simplify it right now, but we can build up to the complexity that we need, and that the student needs to really understand the material. In order to do this, we also need to understand the level at which we're teaching and adjust our content accordingly. Even at the undergraduate level, it still is important to simplify. From being a student myself, I've learned firsthand that when learning a complex concept, it is very easy to get behind if the teacher is moving too quickly. And then once the student has fallen behind, the amount of effort it takes to catch back up is significantly greater. And this really is why it is important to simplify. I also like how Simon said, if you make it something simple, then it's repeatable. And if something is repeatable, then it's understandable. His goal in teaching, and all our goal in teaching, should be that our students can then go share with somebody else the things that you taught them, and not just forget it within minutes to an hour after we've taught the subject. So a helpful tool that I actually used personally when I was learning about the synthesis of energy within a cell is concept mapping. In fact, I don't think that I would have effectively learned the material at all if I had not mapped out the concept. This tool is not only useful for just energy synthesis, but is also a great learning tool for all complex concepts. Now, when using a concept map, the student has new knowledge with which that they're integrating and connecting to existing knowledge. This makes the new knowledge easier to understand and as well remember. The professor's job, on the other hand, in concept mapping is to help the student connect the points from their existing knowledge onto which they attach the incoming new knowledge. So now, what's a concept map? A concept map is a visual organization and representation of knowledge. It shows concepts and ideas and the relationship among them. You create a concept map by writing keywords. Sometimes you enclose those keywords in shapes, such as circles, boxes, or triangles. Then you draw arrows connecting the keywords, the terms, the concepts, and by showing how they are related. Then, once you connected them, you add short explanations by the arrow to explain how these concepts are related. So now into the in-depth critical information. The key factors that I have chosen that I think really are important for energy synthesis all rely on these steps: the breakdown of sugars, the production of ATP and NADH, and then finally we need to understand how the energy synthesized is being used in the body. The reason I have chosen these steps is because we have the where, the how, and the why of energy synthesis. The breakdown of sugars is the where the energy comes from. The how is the production of ATP and NADH. And finally, how the energy is used in the body is the why we need this information. So there's 3 stages of the synthesis of energy from food. Stage 1 is protein and fats and carbohydrates make up most of the food we eat. This food must be broken down into small molecules that can enter into the cytosol of the cell, and then it can be utilized for energy production. The first step in breaking down food is digestion in the mouth, stomach, and intestine. To finish off this digestion, enzymes used by the lysosomes within the cell break down the food into small subunits of amino acids, which come from proteins, sugars, which come from carbohydrates, and fatty acids or glycerols that come from fat. Once this food is digested into these small subunits, they can then enter into the cytosol of the cell, and glycolysis can begin. Now, stage 2 is glycolysis. So, glycolysis is a chain reaction that breaks down the glucose molecule into acetyl-CoA and ATP and NADH. Now, glucose is the sugar that I will be describing in this presentation because it is the dominating molecule for energy production in animals. Other sugars, however, follow a similar path of reaction. So through glycolysis, each molecule of glucose is converted into 2 molecules of pyruvate. During the formation of pyruvate, 2 forms of energy are produced, the famous ATP and NADH that I was talking about earlier. The pyruvate then passes from the cytosol of the cell into the mitochondria, and within the mitochondria, the pyruvate is converted into water and carbon dioxide plus acetyl-CoA. So now, in stage 3, the acetyl-CoA then enters a series of reactions called the citric acid cycle. During this cycle, the acetyl-CoA group is oxidized once again, forming carbon dioxide, and now this happens repeatedly, okay? And the result of this repeated action is a large amount of NADH that is produced. Now, it's also important to know that the NADH that is produced is an electron carrier. So these high energy electrons that are attached to the NADH are now passed along what's called the electron transport chain. This step occurs within the inner membrane of the mitochondria, and it is pushed through a process called oxidative phosphorylation. During this oxidative phosphorylation, energy is released during the transfer and ATP is produced. Now, a couple interesting facts for you is that it has been calculated that there is roughly 10 to the 9th power molecules of ATP in a cell at any instant. It is also interesting to know that this 10 to the 9th power huge number of ATP in the cell is used up and replaced every 1 to 2 minutes. Now, these next couple slides are detailed drawings of the steps that I just mentioned. Now, with so much energy being produced and used within a cell, how is it being utilized throughout the body? Well, ATP is the most important energy source that is synthesized within the cell. It drives everything we do in our lives. It is the reason we are even alive. Without this energy source, our bodies would not function. ATP is what synthesizes macromolecules from various use in our bodies. It is what generates a muscle contraction. It creates the active ion transports of the body, and it initiates thermogenesis. Finally, another huge thing that it does is it drives neuron transmission, which requires a lot of energy for its complex functions. Now let's just think about if one of these functions stopped working. So let's take the lack of muscle contraction. This does not just affect movement. Our lungs couldn't breathe without the muscle contraction of the diaphragm. Our heart would not pump if the muscle fibers could not contract. Our intestines could not even digest food if it wasn't for the peristaltic muscle contraction of the intestines. So as you can see, energy synthesis is an extremely important function of the body, and why our cells have to maintain such a large quantity of energy. So, since 1929, when ATP was first discovered as a substrate for muscle contraction, the scientific community has learned so much more, such as the other functions I just mentioned in the previous slide. With all of these advances, though, in the study of cell biology and the synthesis of energy, it is still extremely important to continue research and expand our knowledge. Some good resources for expansion on the subject are the scholarly journals PubMed, ScienceDirect, and the Journal of Cell Biology. These resources provide scholarly articles on current research done in the realm of biology. Another good resource that I have used regularly is Google Scholar. Google Scholar is a database that searches scholarly journals and articles across any subject matter needed. Finally, I would like to stress the importance of using up-to-date and relevant resources. Just like in concept mapping, where the student builds upon previous knowledge to help better understand new information, we must do the same thing when performing new research. My hopes in doing this presentation is that you will be able to take this information now and effectively be able to teach this information to your students.